Okay. Time to go to work. Damn it. It snowed again. Yahoo. Not enough for me to shovel the driveway. I don't think even enough for the plows to come out. If it keeps snowing, they'll come out. Alright, off to work. Let's go, Bruce. Alright. So, I'm finding one of the problems with these stream of consciousness videos that I make is that, I'll think about what it is I want to talk about before I get in the car, and I'll have some sort of points laid out in my mind, that I want to make, and then I get in the car, and I'm concentrating on the road, and I'm trying to get those points out, and then invariably I'll forget something I really wanted to mention. But whatever. That's I guess the failing of the format that I'm doing. But anyway, what I want to talk about today is a Twitter sort of, I don't even want to call it a feud, just like an exchange, not even an exchange, a Twitter battle that started when Bernie Sanders tweeted something regarding healthcare, and Ben Shapiro quoted his tweet and responded. So Bernie Sanders' tweet was something along the lines of, people get diagnosed with an illness, and then they can't afford the treatment. It's ridiculous. To which Ben Shapiro said, yeah, I went to a furniture store and couldn't afford the couch. It's ridiculous. So people were blasting Ben Shapiro because, he's equating furniture shopping with, healthcare. And of course they take the two extremes. They go, oh yeah, you can't find an ottoman is the same as somebody being, not being able to get treatment for terminal cancer. Well, no. Of course you go with the two extremes, right? But the point that Shapiro's making is, look, it's a service. If you can't afford a service, you can't afford a service. Find a cheaper option for service. Right? Anyway. So I tweeted something along the lines of, I was really hungry. I went to a restaurant. The cheapest item on the menu was $18. I only had $13. Ludicrous. People like to equate healthcare as being, a right, that everybody has a right to medicine. And I mean, I think it's somewhere in the UN Declaration of Rights and Freedoms, Human Rights or whatever, that everyone should have access to medicine. And I agree, people should have access to medicine. Nobody's stopping someone from buying medical insurance, right? There's no law that prohibits people from seeking out medical care. That's all that the right entails. Being provided with access to. That is being given an option to get, right? Doesn't mean that you need to be provided for. It doesn't mean that your medical needs have to be provided. And this is a point that Ben Shapiro makes all the time. Socialism and socialist ideology thinks that people are deserving of things simply by the fact that they are breathing. That I'm alive, give me stuff, right? Is how he boils it down. A lot of people don't like Ben Shapiro. He can come off as cocky and arrogant, and he's got a sort of he speaks very fast. He has sort of a high-pitched voice. He's got those, he's got these eyebrows that make every time you look at him, he looks kind of sinister, right? I understand why people don't like Ben Shapiro. He reminds me of, remember Archie comics? He reminds me of Reggie. Reggie's the dark-haired guy who's, Archie's rival. He has more money than Archie. He's constantly, trying to get the affections of Veronica. And he's a smartass, and that's who Ben Shapiro is. Ben Shapiro is the Reggie of the Archie comics, right? Anyway, So I understand why he's not likable. It doesn't mean that he's not right. Someone online once, made a point in some thread I was reading. I think it might have been 4chan, but anyway, that if you can't get it yourself, if you can't walk out into the woods and grab it on your own, it's not a right. And I think that's kind of a weird analogy, but basically, you don't have a right to something that someone else worked for. And that's where the socialist mindset comes from. They're like, well, everybody's got to pay their fair share. But most socialists I know are for a progressive tax system because at heart they're communists. Or you're paying into a social contract. There's no social contract. I didn't sign anything. Okay? And they also operate from this mindset that government exists to help the people who can't help themselves. And that government has an obligation to help its citizens. I don't agree. I don't believe that's the role of the state. It's too hot in here. I don't believe that's the role of the state. I think the role of the state is to protect people's rights and freedoms. To make sure that when people's freedoms are violated, that they have a recourse in the courts. Providing for the poor, providing for people who can't afford health care, providing for people who can't afford food, that's the role of charity. And up until like 100 years ago, or less than 100 years, I'll say 60 years ago, 70 years ago, charities were doing a pretty good job of that. There were mutual societies, there were, churches used to build hospitals, churches used to build orphanages, right? And then the government got their greedy little paws in on it. But the point about, what was going on between Bernie Sanders and Ben Shapiro and everybody else who was, piling on Ben Shapiro regarding healthcare is they feel as though it's not just a moral duty for people to help out those who, are in bad situations. Like somebody who, has been diagnosed with like a liver disease, but can't afford treatment or can't afford the insurance to pay for that treatment. Yeah, people do have a moral duty to help out those who can't help themselves, who don't have the means to thrive and survive. But that's not the role of the state to intervene in that sense. That's the role of you and I. That's the role of people to say, oh shit, man, you're in trouble, here, let me help you out. But if you take the state and say, hey, this guy's starving, use your power and go and get that guy to give him some food. That's where it becomes tyranny, right? And that's where it becomes, a tyranny of good intentions. And for the state to get involved in things like welfare, food stamps, things like that, get involved in healthcare with the Unaffordable Care Act, they only fuck it up. I'm sorry, but there's no impetus for them to realize a profit. There's no impetus for them to keep costs low, because they're not in competition. Like in Canada, we have socialized healthcare. We have full-on single-payer healthcare, but it doesn't meet everybody's needs. There are things that aren't covered. I used to work retail for forever, since I was like 15 years old. I was on my feet constantly. And working retail for a long time, being on your feet constantly, I eventually developed varicose veins. I mean, it also had to do with the fact that I'm pretty sloth-like, but I developed varicose veins to the point where they were causing me pain. I couldn't work for I couldn't stand for more than a couple hours. I shouldn't say I couldn't work, but I couldn't stand for more than a couple of hours before my legs would start to hurt. So anyway, I go to the doctor. I say, hey, yeah, I've got these varicose veins. I'd like to, get them looked at, taken care of if I can, because they're starting to cause me pain. He goes, well, you got to see a specialist. So, first off, if you have a GP, if you have like a regular family doctor, sometimes you can wait up to 2-3 weeks to get an appointment. that, you know, suits your time frame, right? Like most people work 9 to 5. And most doctors' offices operate like 8 to 4. And sometimes they have an after-hours clinic on like three days of the week. So first off, I gotta wait until I can get some time off, or I've got a shift that allows me to get a doctor's appointment. I don't like not going to work. I don't like taking time away from work. But anyway. So it took me like 2 weeks to get an appointment with a doctor when I finally resolved to do so. And the doctor says, you gotta see a specialist. It took me 9 weeks. No, not 9 weeks. 7 weeks, I think. It was more than a month, almost 2 months, for me to get an appointment with a specialist, because it's not anything that's like drastic or you know, life-threatening, right? And I go to the specialist and say, hey, yeah, I got these varicose veins. I want them taken care of. You know, what kind of treatment can be done? And he's like, well, first off, before you go too far, the ministry recently changed the coverage rules regarding varicose veins. They're no longer covered. It's now considered cosmetic. So it's not covered. And I'm like, okay, but what if it's, you know, what if it's causing me pain? You know, I work standing on my feet all day. He's like, in order for it to be covered, it would have to look something like this. And he showed me this picture of this woman who looked like a freak show. This woman had varicose veins, and it looked like, it must have been agonizing. Look at the two little popped veins in the back of my legs compared to this woman's legs. You know, I was like, holy crap. It would have to be something like this in order for me to make a reasonable plea to the government to cover this. So I'm like, great. So my point is, I pay taxes to cover my health, to pay for my single payer, right? But I actually have a condition that I feel I need treatment for, and I mean, I thought the whole purpose of having coverage was to deal with ailments that cause you pain and discomfort and the whole bit, right? But they don't cover it. So I need supplemental health insurance. And I don't have supplemental health insurance that would cover that sort of thing. And so my friends are like, well, then, you know, your supplemental health insurance is crap. You need to get better supplemental health insurance. I'm like, the point is, I am forced to pay for healthcare that is not meeting my needs. And because I'm forced to pay for healthcare that is not meeting my needs, I can't afford to pay for the care that I need. So my option, and I didn't invent this option, I think if the government wants to be involved in healthcare, they should have a voluntary co-op. That is, if you want to be part of the co-op, you pay into the system through taxes or through fees or whatever it is you want. And, or better yet, have it fee-based on a pay-as-you-go, and make it means tested, like, you know, rental co-ops are, like housing co-ops are, right? So the more you make, the more you pay. So if a guy breaks his finger and he makes $20,000 a year, they run it through a table and they go, okay, for us to set your finger, it's going to cost you $25. Another guy making $200,000 a year breaks his finger, costs him $250. Right? Now the actual cost to set a finger is probably something in the neighborhood of like $45 or $50. So the guy who pays $250 is helping to supplement the guy who can only pay $25. Anyway, like that's a bare bones sort of assessment or analysis of like a co-op system for healthcare. And I know these things exist. I've heard people on the radio talk about systems like that in the United States. But basically, I think that would be a viable role for government to run a healthcare providing system or whatever, to provide healthcare. I think that would be a reasonable approach for government to take. But again, only if it's voluntary. If you don't want to partake in it, you don't have to, right? Anyway, that's my rant on healthcare. I'm at work, so yeah, like and subscribe. Follow me on Twitter, at CraigBragg. And I'm on Facebook too. So anyway, thanks a lot. Bye.